Way We Were, where we revisit the past to understand how the ebb and flow of popular culture shapes the way we are. Only on The Podcaster.
Hi, this is Rima, and you're listening to The Way We Were. Today, I wanted to talk to you about Andrew Dominik's Blonde, which, as you know, is now playing on Netflix. And to be frank, I didn't really want to see the film. I had heard so many terrible things about it, but finally I did see it. And one scene, in a way, summed it up for me. You know, the scene where a tremulous Norma Jean, much before her explosive stardom branded her as Marilyn Monroe. That scene where she's in the middle of a screen test for Don't Bother to Knock. And very tearfully she reads this line: I'll be whatever you want me to be. You know, this moment brought home to me the fact that Norma Jean did become what the world wanted her to be. She dyed her hair a platinum blonde and she erased herself out of existence so that she could become a screen sensation. And when she died, in death she became just a trigger for some more titillation and speculation. She became a poster girl of foretold tragedy in a way, forever frozen in time in that beautiful ballooning white dress that we all remember. You know, offering herself to the camera and to our gaze, with that trusting, blinding smile that hid a dark past and a complicated present. And a girl who didn't live long enough to have a future. I also found it ironical in a way that Ana de Armas, who plays Monroe in this film, also had to erase her Cuban-Spanish identity to become the blonde, white symbol of ultimate desirability, to be able to land this role that normally would not go to a Latina. At a time when it's hard for a woman of color to even play a mermaid in Hollywood, Ana was given a part that, as you know, has traditionally been played on TV and film by white women like Mira Sorvino and Ashley Judd, Michelle Williams, and so many others. Ana has Cuban roots, and she recently said on a late-night talk show that it's miraculous that she got to play Monroe. But I thought maybe it isn't. Because maybe she already is the Marilyn of this generation, you know, on her way to be over-sexualized and objectified in films like Knock Knock, Deep Water, and Blonde. So the question that came to me was, has anything really changed for female actors in Hollywood since Monroe died so tragically and prematurely at the age of 36? The answer is not much. You know, if you go by the Me Too allegations that exploded a few years ago to shake the power structures that are still, you know, controlled by men. And you can say that a little change is afoot. Considering big studios like Disney are now beginning to push for diversity and inclusion, and last year even Amazon Studios made a commitment to increase the number of women and members of underrepresented racial or ethnic groups in their series and films. And as you know, even Harvey Weinstein, and you know, who kind of was described by Meryl Streep as God once upon a time in an award show, he also went to jail finally for putting countless, you know, women and film aspirants through the horror that Monroe was rumored to have gone through or suffered at the hands of the studio bosses of her time. But there was a lot more to Monroe which Blonde chooses to disregard, and that's tragic, you know. Because this film doesn't celebrate her at all for everything that she achieved, despite all that unresolved trauma. The film, in fact, perpetuates her victimhood And all we see through the film are Anna's quivering lips, her wide, teary eyes, and a body that can never shake off the violating male gaze. And I know, and so does the audience, that the film is based on a fictionalized account of Monroe's life by Joyce Carol Oates. But the fact is that that book was fiction. This film, however, leaves no room for us to think of Monroe as anyone other than a hunted and haunted victim, and that's very sad. In one of his recent interviews, director Andrew Dominik, in a way, conveyed absolute disregard for Marilyn's legacy as an actor. In fact, he said that nobody really watched her films, which is not true, really. He also had some very strange and rather insulting things, to say about one of her most loved films, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. And not surprisingly, his film reflects the same indifference towards her talent and has polarized, critics and viewers like me alike. I remember reading on Twitter, somebody had posted this. #blonde Netflix has to be one of the most disrespectful, distasteful, fabricated biopics I've ever seen. Marilyn was not weak. She stood up for civil rights, women's rights to equal pay. She never wanted to be treated as a joke or a sex object. The film did all of the above. And while reading reviews on the film, I came across this one in the New York Times, where the writer said this, and I quote, "Marilyn was an actress of uncommon talent. But once again, a director is more interested in examining her body, literally in this case, than getting inside her mind. What's missing is any sense of what made Monroe more than just another beautiful woman in Hollywood, her genius and her grace, the gestures, the comic timing, and so on." And I agree completely with this comment, because the very first scene in the movie, if you see, reveals the director's, in a way, preoccupation with her body, and the narrative really doesn't go beyond her physicality and its allure and its tragedy. And it made me wonder if it's ever possible for women to be more than their bodies, their hair, their skin color, not just on the screen, but off it as well. Even as I record this, women in Iran are putting their lives online as they make bonfires of their headscarves and fiercely, protest the custodial murder of a 22-year-old girl who was imprisoned for daring to show her hair in public. So many people, I think around 92 people have reportedly died so far in the protests. And in India, if you remember, just a few months back, women in hijabs were systematically targeted in educational institutions. So you can say that the horror women face is relentless. I hope you remember Hathras, you remember Kathua and Unnao, because we can't really afford to forget. I hope you remember 19-year-old Ankita Bhandari, a receptionist at an Uttarakhand resort who was reportedly killed because she refused to service rich clients. In yet another incident that to me revealed how little women matter to the world and to us, was when Bilkis Banu's rapists were released and welcomed with sweets and garlands. Really, what is there to say when things like that happen? But coming back to OTT platforms, because we were talking about this film, just count the number of shows and films that are dedicated to serial killers of women. Ever wondered why that is? So many procedural shows begin with the discovery of a mutilated female body. And a series like You which is about a psychopathic killer and stalker of women, has consistently enjoyed a very high rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Also, count the number of shows dedicated to Ted Bundy, a killer who confessed to killing 28 women but could have killed many more. Only occasionally have critics questioned why we need films like Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile, which had Zac Efron, starring as Bundy. Only very, very occasionally have people asked, why did we need to hear his taped interviews on Netflix? He was a murderer after all, right? While most shows and films dedicated to Bundy have kind of focused on his charisma and his story, I saw a 2020 documentary called Ted Bundy Falling for a Killer, which was slightly different. Because for a change, it humanized the women he had killed. And also the one woman that he fell in love with and did not kill. The film showed how his crimes adversely impacted the feminist movement, which was just beginning to gain momentum in the 70s. And how he frequently hunted colleges and universities to find his victims, who could have lived to create a more gender equitable world. The series also questioned why Bundy had not only enjoyed the empathy of the media, but a judge who told him, among other things in the court, "Take care of yourself, young man. I say that to you sincerely. Take care of yourself, please. I don't feel any animosity towards you. I want you to know that. Take care of yourself." What I found really sad about this statement was that he didn't state a single word of sympathy for the destroyed potential of Bundy's victims. And that says a lot about how little sympathy is offered to women when they suffer or even after they are killed. Today, with the rise of social media, women can also be witch hunted, vilified, and demonized in media trials, the way Rhea Chakravarti was not too long back, even though there wasn't even a shred of evidence against her. So what really comes across to me through this film and through everything that I read on a daily basis is that misogyny is a lived reality for women, whether they are battling for reproductive rights or for the right to safely exist or to work, travel, or dress the way they want, whether they want to fall in love without being judged or attacked. It's hard for them to just exist. And even success is not guaranteed to empower them, as we can see in the case of Marilyn Monroe and in recent times in the story of Britney Spears. How women are represented on screen matters a lot, I feel. And when they take ownership of their own stories, I feel the earth shifts a little. There is this documentary called Miss Americana, which catches Taylor Swift, in the exact moment when she starts harnessing her fame to impact the political landscape in America. And it's a good film to watch because it shows agency, it shows power. Another such film is Gaga 5'2", where we see the global success of Lady Gaga through her own gaze, And another one, which is a favorite of mine, is Shania Twain's Not Just a Girl. And this one shows how many challenges the singer managed to transcend before she became one of the most successful musicians of all time. I've read her biography as well, and it was riveting. And then, of course, recently there was Jennifer Lopez's Halftime, where we see her as a woman whose success is a triumph of will because she had it, so hard. I mean, she really faced so many challenges and was questioned and mocked and derided for her talent which she had, but she was always this beautiful woman who couldn't act according to critics. It's really hard to find a crime drama that accords any dignity to victims and survivors and doesn't glamorize a predator. But one such show was Unbelievable on Netflix, which was very insightful and showed how brutal the justice system is. Because instead of offering support to survivors of sexual assault, it asks them questions like this: can you be believed? Is your story believable? This is also possibly the first time that I saw a sexual predator being presented without the power that cinema and society have traditionally accorded him. After he's captured, there is a telling shot of him as just a male body, denuded of any power or any means to hurt another woman ever again. This, I feel, was a hugely significant moment because usually all forms of reporting and stories about gender violence, always embed the helplessness of the female body in your memory. So, to go back to where we started, I feel films like Blonde do not do any justice to women because they just focus on their tragedies and their vulnerabilities, not on their power. And now that I've got that out of the way, I'll go and rewatch The Misfits to see Marilyn Monroe at the height of her power as a performer, as the glorious actor that she was, as the acting powerhouse she was on her way to becoming. But most of all, I want to remember the girl who once said, above all, I want to be treated as a human being.
The Way We Were, where we revisit the past to understand how the ebb and flow of popular culture shapes the way we are. Only on The Podcaster.